welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Good afternoon to those of you in Europe. My name is Jane Peters. I work for the Delegation of German Industry and Commerce. I'm a project and communications manager here. I'm primarily responsible for our international finance institutions portfolio. And together with my colleague Teresa Weiss from Advantage Austria, we both will be moderating today's webinar, which, as I mentioned, will be recorded and slides will be shared with you all afterwards as well. Teresa, over to you.
Ja, herzlich willkommen auch von meiner Seite. Mein Name ist Teresa Weiss. Ich bin hier unter anderem auch für Weltbank-Anfragen zuständig am Außenwirtschaftscenter Washington. Thank you for joining our webinar today from Austria and Germany. We are delighted to have Enzo De Laurentiis as our presenter today, and we welcome him warmly. And before we start with his presentations, we have two short introductions, and I will hand over to our commercial attaché, Irene.
Yeah, thank you so much, Teresa. A warm welcome also from my side to our speaker and to our audience. To begin with, please allow me a couple of words of introduction in German. Ja, nachdem unser Zielpublikum, unsere Teilnehmerinnen und Teilnehmer, Sie ja heute hauptsächlich aus Deutschland und aus Österreich kommen, denke ich, sind alle deutschsprachig und ich möchte mich kurz auf Deutsch vorstellen und auch unsere Organisation und unsere Services vorstellen. Mein Name ist, wie gesagt, Irene Lakagin und ich bin die Wirtschaftsdelegierte am Außenwirtschaftscenter Washington. Das muss ich auch immer kurz erwähnen, weil gerade die österreichischen Firmen auch oft verwirrt sind mit den Namen Advantage Austria. Das ist einfach unser Name im Ausland. Aber Sie als österreichische Unternehmerinnen und Unternehmer kennen uns wahrscheinlich unter dem Namen Außenwirtschaftscenter. Ja, wie gesagt, wir hier vom Außenwirtschaftscenter Washington betreuen das IFI-Thema, das Thema rund um die International Financial Institutions und da vor allem alles, was sich in Washington abspielt. Das heißt, wir sind zuständig für Weltbank, für IDB, aber auch IFC oder die bilaterale oder die nicht bilaterale, aber die USAID-Entwicklungsorganisation. Das heißt, bei allen Fragen oder Unterstützungen, die Sie brauchen zu diesen Themen, können Sie sich natürlich jederzeit an uns, ans Außenwirtschaftscenter Washington wenden. Wir helfen Ihnen dabei, Projekte und Chancen zu identifizieren. Wir organisieren aber auch Informationsveranstaltungen, so wie diese heute hier. Wir helfen Ihnen aber auch quasi in person bei Präsenzterminen, wenn Sie Geschäftsreisen nach Washington planen und Kontakte knüpfen wollen. Auch hier können wir Ihnen gerne helfen. Und wir helfen natürlich auch, falls es mal Probleme gibt. Das kommt ja natürlich leider auch immer wieder vor, wenn Sie sich beteiligt haben und danach es Probleme gibt, dann versuchen wir hier auch gerne beim Troubleshooting zu helfen. Dann möchte ich Ihnen noch vorstellen, unsere Kolleginnen und Kollegen, wir haben das Außenwirtschaftscenter in Manila, das ist zuständig für Projekte der Asian Development Bank und dann haben wir das Außenwirtschaftscenter Casablanca, das für die African Development Bank zuständig ist. Das heißt, an diese beiden Stellen können Sie sich auch jederzeit wenden, wenn Sie für die anderen Regionen Fragen haben. Und dann haben wir noch ein Team in unserer Zentrale, vielleicht kennen Sie die Kolleginnen und den Kollegen schon. Das Team heißt Außenwirtschaft Netzwerk Projekte International, kurz NPI, mit Isabel Schmidbauer und Bernhard Bös. Sie betreuen sie auch in unserer Zentrale und wir teilen dann gerne über die Slides auch ihre Kontaktdaten. Last but not least, ein ganz wichtiger Hinweis, vielleicht kennen Sie das österreichische Förderprogramm Go International. Sie sehen bei der Theresa so schön im Hintergrund auch das Logo, das Go International Logo. Ich teile dann auch gleich nochmal den Link. Das ist ein österreichisches Förderprogramm und im Rahmen dieses Förderprogramms gibt es verschiedene Förderinstrumente. Und interessant für Sie könnte sein das Förderinstrument Projektgeschäftscheck. Da unterstützen wir, beziehungsweise das Go International Programm, abgewickelt durch die Außenwirtschaft Austria, Sie bei den Vorbereitungen für eine Teilnahme an einem Projekt mit einem IFI oder irgendeinem Innovationsprogramm mit einem Zuschuss von 50% zu Ihren externen Kosten. Wie gesagt, ich teile dann gleich den Link, dann können Sie sich das im Detail anschauen. Ja, that's all from my side, from the Austrian side. I'm very glad that today's webinar is another Austro-German co-production. And now I'd like to hand over to my colleague, Christoph Schemionek.
Yeah, thank you, Irina. I feel a little bit everything is said, but not everyone has said it yet. That's the Swiss ambassador said this the other day, and I thought I need to bring this joke. Also, welcome from my side. It's great to see so many participants interested in this topic today. Thank you all for dialing in. My name is Christoph Szymionik. I'm the Irene of Germany. I'm the head of the delegation of German Industry and Commerce. We are part of the worldwide network of Germany's worldwide network of German chambers and commerce abroad. We had 150 locations in more than 90 countries. Basically, we do the same what Advantage Austria is doing, but more focused on Germany, of course. Here in Washington, we collaborate very closely with Advantage Austria, with our good friends, and especially when it comes to the international finance institutions. Irene mentioned it already, the World Bank, Inter-American Development Bank, and then there's also the MCC. So there are tons of opportunities, and we want to show these opportunities to German and Austrian companies. And that's why I'm very happy and grateful that Enzo De Laurentiis, the former Chief Procurement Officer at the World Bank, takes the time today to talk to us, especially about the topic of rated criteria. This was an initiative initiated by Enzo, and I think if you haven't heard about it yet, you should hear about it. So that's why I'm again glad you are here today. And it should be of great interest for European companies that try to stay competitive within the World Bank procurement. And that's, again, Enzo, thank you for your time. And with this, back to Jane.
Great. Thank you, Christoph and Irena. Now, to introduce our speaker, Christoph already mentioned a lot of great information about Enzo. As mentioned, he's a World Bank consultant with over 30 years of experience in public sector procurement and almost 26 years in management leadership positions at the bank. And as mentioned, until November 2023, he was also the Chief Procurement Officer at the World Bank. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Enzo. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jane, and good afternoon, good morning, everyone. A great pleasure to be with you today to tell you a little bit about how the World Bank, but also procurement within the World Bank, are really at the cusp of another major step change. So I think I'm going to share my screen, if I'm allowed to do that. I can't do that yet. Maybe, Jane, if you can... Yeah. Anyway, I'll continue just while you do that. So I think today, before I get into the substance of rating criteria and other specifics, I think it would be important to set the stage with a bit of information on how we're making progress at the World Bank toward a bigger and better World Bank group. And this is a response to a call to action from our shareholders. As you may know, the G20 last year in September, when they met in Delhi, they asked all the MDBs to step up and become even more ambitious in not only helping our clients with greater speed and impact, but also to mainstream what we call global public goods into the country strategies. So it's more than just helping the countries with their specific need, but actually it's also helping them with needs, because some of these global public goods have a major impact on their own lives and development. Climate, of course, is looming large, is one of the biggest things. So can I share it now? Can I go into the share screen? Yes.
Yes, you should be able to share.
Hold on 1 second. I'm going to... Okay,
and
perfect.
While you're doing that, Enzo, I'll just mention to everyone, I think it was already mentioned by Teresa, but if you have any questions, please feel free to enter them through the Q&A function, and we will take all questions at the end. But if something comes up while Enzo is presenting, feel free to throw it in the Q&A chat, and we will address it at the end of the presentation.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Jane. So as I was saying, we are, in the process of further developing our institution in a number of ways. And in Marrakesh, the annual meetings of the bank and the IMF last October, our governors endorsed a new bold vision for the World Bank, and that is really if you walk in the Weltbank building, you'll see enshrined in the motto that is in the main floor, on the main hall. It says that our vision is of a world free of poverty on a livable planet, and that really means climate sustainability and these other aspects of global public goods, which are also including fragility and a number of cross-border challenges. So we really are already into a new bank with a new vision, but there are a couple of things that are happening as well. But before I get there, let me just say that I assume that all of you are quite familiar with the bank already. So I'm not going to go through a lot of information on who we are or our structure. I'm just, you know, I think suffice to say that the World Bank is the largest provider of development financing, including climate financing now, which is one of the most important aspects of today development financing. And we are, you know, working in 150 countries. We have 146 countries, and we have a very, very large portfolio of projects with a major focus right now on Africa. You know, 43% of the portfolio is in Africa, but as you can see, it's distributed in other regions as well. Africa, of course, is a major focus of development, not only of the multilateral institutions who work in Africa, and there are several, but also bilaterals. So it's really a major.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, please.
We can't see your screen if you have slides up right now.
Oh, you cannot?
No.
Oh, let's see. I don't know.
You should be able to share your screen though.
Let me see. Let me try again. I did. Hold on a second. Apologies. Share. Can you see it now?
Yes, it looks like it's setting it up. Let's give it a second. Yes, perfect. So we can see the.
Excellent. Apologies. I thought it was already, already
no worries.
up. Okay, so yeah, I was basically, you know, showing a few data, but it says that it's really a major operation across the world with a lot of focus in Africa for 3%. In terms of portfolio, the lion's share remains infrastructure, which are transport, water, and energy, but with projects across all the sectors of the economy, with the exception of defense and nuclear. We pretty much finance every type of project. So I'm going back to what I was saying before, the big call to action. Why? I know, as you know, the world in the last several years has suffered multiple crises, what they call polycrisis. The pandemic has really done a lot of damage on the economies of many countries. The global economic condition had got really worse in the last few years. It's getting better now. So, you know, the fears of global recession has faded. Inflation is a little bit moderated, but the global economic prospect remain quite subdued for developing countries, and has been the worst 5-year span in 3 decades for them, with particularly the burden of high debt. So that is high interest rates, and that has been a problem when a lot of developing countries are at risk of that distress. So as some of them in Africa, for example, we're already beginning to recover a little bit, very slowly from the pandemic. They have been hit again because, you know, the war in Ukraine has also created a major impact financially on raw materials and so forth. So it's really being quite a difficult situation, and exacerbated by natural disasters. And here we go to climate, right? Think about some of the worst droughts in Africa, floodings, and really a serious problem, which has set back the clock on development in many ways. For example, in education, I mean, there's been a really major setback of some of the gains in the previous years, of course, health and so forth. So that's why we are in quite a different scenario. There's always been a difficult business development, but this required a new paradigm. And that's why, and I think this is important to say that, because the bank is leading a little bit the MDBs. In fact, it's not just the bank. All the MDBs that asked to step up, and the bank as usual plays a bit of a leadership role, but they are asked to not only reshape the mission, which I mentioned, but also evolve the operating model and enhance their financial capacity. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the financial capacity. It is relevant because we are ultimately talking about a bigger bank, so more lending, so more procurement, and this is true for all the MDBs. There are a lot of things we already done to leverage our balance sheet better, like for example reducing our debt ratio from 20 to 19, a lot of new financial products. And a number of things, hybrid capital mechanisms. So there are a number of things too, but ultimately we'll have to grow also in other ways, which is a different conversation. But evolving the operating model is exactly where procurement is, because we are asked to become more agile, more streamlined, faster, but also with more impact on value. Obviously, because it's not just bigger, but better. It means scaling up impact. And to scale up impact, we have to have better processes. And at the core of processes in investment projects, that's what we're talking about today, it is procurement, right? Because if you want to deliver the best results in terms of infrastructure or goods or services that we are providing to our clients, you need to attract and incentivize the best in the market to come. And here, I just want to emphasize how important it is for us to do this outreach. So it's not just for you very legitimately, being interested in business opportunities, but it's really essential to deliver development results for the World Bank. And I am a big believer, as my colleagues there know, that partnership with the private sector is key to really be able to deliver the best results to the clients and to implement good projects. If we don't attract the best in the market, and European companies like German and Austrian companies are some of the strongest, we are not really delivering what we are supposed to deliver in terms of development. Of course, there is a broader conversation on working with the private sector, mobilizing private capital, which is different. But I think everything is related at the end, because building the trust and working together, and there's going to be a lot of private-public projects. So hybrid capital projects. So at the end of the day, there's going to be a bit of connecting the dots between all these. I think procurement plays a big role in that, because procurement has changed significantly. Once in a generation reform, in a few principles, but principles that have been implemented with a very significant toolbox of guidance, standard documents, training, hands-on support, and so forth. And this is where the key objective of the World Bank Procurement Framework became effective in 2016. But I believe that, of course, the first few years took a little bit of time to ensure that the change management process was effective, was significant, because we moved from a one-size-fits-all to a fit-for-purpose approach, and that is very, very different, right? So we had, as you may remember, some of you participated before, we had guidelines that applied pretty much everywhere the same way. Why we have very different clients, but not only different countries, they're different markets. Markets are very, very different, and they continue to change. Not only they're different from goods, obviously, works or consulting, but also different from type of infrastructure, type of services, particular technologies and innovation that is or may be required for a particular project. So being able to adapt to the unique characteristic of the operating environment was essential. And this is, I would say, the guiding principle. It doesn't mean that anything goes for the borrowers. It doesn't mean that they can do what they want, quite the opposite. But it means that the bank has the ability to help the borrower develop strategies that target the very specific market and also manage the very specific risks in that operating environment, which is the country, again, the market, because some of the risks are market risks, some are country risks, some are stakeholder risks. And then, of course, there is a whole host of risks that are super important for development for the World Bank, but also for most European countries. The European Union has very similar rules, and these are environmental and social risks. And there are other risks that are emerging that we're dealing with, like cybersecurity, for example, risks that are very related to some specific industry, like the solar, as you know, forced labor. So, managing all these risks and leveraging the opportunities that the market has to go beyond even the bar and do much better. That's what fit for purpose is, to design procurement strategies that allow to do exactly that. And of course, the bank can do that now in a much different way, because first of all, can engage with the market much more. You may remember in the past, we were a lot more at arm's length. We would review, the bank didn't feel very comfortable talking to the market because it felt maybe there is conflict of interest. That has changed completely. You may not always find the best behavior, but that's a behavior issue in individuals, but the clearly mandate is to engage and making sure the borrower engages early with the market in a very proactive and productive way, but also the bank models that, right, by responding to the queries, by also engaging directly. I've done, when I was CPO, very significant deep dives in some markets like health, for example, or energy or water, where we really talked to the companies a lot to understand what was driving the best in the market, how we could change our approach and incentivize them. I think we design value for money approaches that would work well with them. And of course, the decision making, as I said, it's much more flexible, but not because there are no rules. There are rules in the process, but the way processes are designed is based on procurement strategies that are developed at the beginning of the project, and they take into account all these characteristics. The cornerstone of this is what we call the project procurement strategy for development, because it's exactly that. It's a procurement strategy that is designed to meet the development objectives of the project. By the way, all these aspects are also the subject of guidance notes. So if you go on our website, you can actually find a lot of information. And I really believe that winning strategy begins with having a lot of information and understanding exactly how the procurement strategies are made, the processes are carried out, the decisions are made. And that also helps you when you prepare your proposal to understand what is the best way to present your added value. We have done a review of the first 5 years. This was already almost 2 years ago now, but it was very successful, but it showed that we can go farther. Successful in the sense that there was more diverse entrants, so much better prepared strategies, much more fit for purpose. We've done even better in fragile countries because we focus a lot more on fragile countries, because a risk-based approach that we take, it really means putting more resources and more hands-on support on countries that have low capacity. So actually that's very important because, again, as I said, we want to make sure that great company, good company go to difficult countries, not only because they need it, but because they should know that that's where we put a lot of emphasis. So it's almost actually safer in a way. Don't want to say ever emphasize safer, because it's safe to go anywhere when the World Bank is financing because of our rules and supervision, but we put a lot more attention and hands-on support. We actually help the borrower doing the procurement in very difficult country and environment. And we have a very, very close supervision, and we have all kind of direct payment to the contractor. So we have all kind of protection, so to speak, and that's why it's so important to understand how we work now. And of course, we have a much better way to track information for risk management purposes, but also for really for market intelligence that is actionable. And we also focus a lot on building capacity of the borrowers beyond our projects. So now we go even farther on this. There are a couple of things that are important to mention. And this is related to what I said before. We are called to do more, right? As a bank, but also as procurement. All the multilateral banks actually are collaborating. Our respective presidents signed an agreement recently to work as a system for scale and impact. There are different aspects, which I already mentioned. They have to work on climate together. They have to work on raising private capital together. They have to work on increasing their financial firepower, but also they have to work better at the country level, what we used to call country platforms, to really ensure that first of all, we are harmonized, we don't duplicate our rules, and we have made a lot of progress on that. But also we find ways to build capacity at the country level and beginning to leverage all the aspects that make up value for money, which are moving fast. It's not static. There are things, for example, that emerged during the pandemic that now are front and center of our attention when we look at value for money. And one of them is supply chain management. I mean, the supply chains are very, very important because in times of disruption, for example, like during the pandemic, you could have paralysis because parts of the supply chains are interrupted, and you can have risks in the supply chains, environmental, social risks. So the security of supply and the management of the risks are important. So there needs to be seen in evaluation who has better strategy to deal with that. Life cycle costing is super important, right? It's not relevant just to look at the initial, capital investment. It's very important to look at the cost of the investment over the usable life of the investment, all the way to disposal. So there are much more dynamic use of life cycle costing now. There are, again, risks that emerge, and there are need to move very, very quickly and adapt very agile in a very agile way. During the pandemic, we worked very differently. We even had a method called bank facilitated procurement, which is a form of hands-on support, but where we actually took it very far, and the bank itself helped negotiate the contracts because the borrowers could not even access the market. So, we are able to move very quickly during the initial phase of the food security efforts. We were working, making sure that we could work with grains markets, which work very differently. So, we can move in a very agile way. And it's very important that we talk to the market a lot, because we understand from the market how these things work. For example, in the vaccines, we never really had to deal with situations like that before. And it's a completely different type of contract for those of you who are familiar with. And we adapt to that and make sure that, again, on a fit for purpose, we could use that and still managing the risk, but making sure that the best suppliers in the market would participate. And then, of course, contract management. Contract management is super important because a lot of the value for money is lost during contract management. Now, it's important to say we are not party to the contract. We have no privity to the contract, but we are now a lot more hands-on on helping the borrower in implementing the contract, making sure that the parties are, working, applying the contract, that is equitable, that, that you're getting paid, and, and making sure that the contract moves on in a dynamic and in a good way. So that's what we call performance plus. So all this, for me, is going to be essential to support this enhanced operational model that is part and parcel of this evolution of the Weltbank. So you can expect even more reform and even more dynamic evolution of the way procurement is implemented by the bank, because it's essential to support the broad evolution of the bank. One of the things that it's important to say, and it's environmental and social aspects. These are so critical, not only because everything the bank does is sustainable, and of course, this is very consistent with the European Union, with the German and Austrian laws, but it is also one of our core policies, the environmental and social framework, which I would recommend to become familiar with, because it is, with procurement, it's almost like a twin policy. If without procurement, it's actually very difficult to implement well the environmental and social framework, because ultimately those in the environmental and social framework are requirements and objectives for the borrower. But if they don't cascade to contractors, it's impossible to really say that you implemented it on the ground. So we streamlined and incorporated all the 10 standards, or as relevant, of course. And there are 10 standards in the environmental social framework, anything from labor issues to community health and safety, natural resource management, and there are a number of requirements for contractors, and all that is being included in the procurement documents, in particular the works documents, so the infrastructure documents, because there's a lot of those who are really relevant, like the labor provision, for example, are very important. So all that you'll find there. And why is it important? Well, it's important because the bar is very high. And because it's very high, it obviously makes already a natural selection. Those contractors who are able to meet the bar. And European contractors are already used to such a bar, because the European Union is very high, and most countries, certainly Germany and Austria, have very high requirements. So I think this is already providing a very legitimate comparative advantage. These are some examples of type of risks. The rating criteria are, not everything. They're related to value for money. There are many ways to build value for money in a procurement process, but they're essential. Because not only this is the way the world works now. I mean, we were a bit behind, I'm confessing this, and the reason is that we have very different shareholders, very different countries, so it took a little bit of time to get here, but when we got here, made it mandatory last September of 23, we really were ready to do it, and we built a lot of capacity, and our shareholders were unanimously supporting it, and our borrowers and our staff. So we're ready to do it, and hopefully we're doing well. It's important also because what we are asking the market to do is not only to meet the bar, but to tell us how they go beyond the bar. And that's how, the bidding process becomes, I think, much more interesting and attractive for companies, because you can really build in your proposal a very clear explanation or how on a certain criteria that are included in the evaluation, you go beyond. Why you're better, why you're different than others. So it really gives you an option to bring in that extra value, knowing that that extra value is going to be taken into account. This is one of the big criticisms that we received before, and we listen and follow the advice from the market. They were saying, well, look, some of us don't come, they were telling us, particularly the big companies, but even the medium size, because we have a lot of extra value and you just give to the lowest cost. That's no longer true. You still hear that as a criticism, because there's not enough yet awareness, but that's why we're doing all this outreach. Is no longer true. It's mandatory, and let me emphasize, mandatory in all international procurement to use criteria that are used to assess aspect of quality, sustainability, both environmental and social, and even innovation. When appropriate. And then, of course, there is the optimal balance that is case by case decided between price and quality and sustainability. So this gives you a bit of a visual of, there are some criteria that are very basic that you have to pass or fail. And those are, like the very starting point. But in the sort of a hierarchy of value, the tip of the pyramid here, which is value for money, which is a multi-dimensional concept that is a true objective of modern procurement, is value for money, right? Because procurement is used to deliver on a broad range of policy objectives by any government, including, of course, multilateral organizations like the bank. Certainly European governments and the European Union have many policy objectives that are delivered through procurement, not just efficient delivery of services, but also, as I said, environmental, social, and other, could be support of a disadvantaged group. It could be any other number of socioeconomic objectives that are used to procurement. So when you get in minimum requirements, of course, it's a pass or fail, but then when you get into rating criteria, you get into value for money, and that's why we did it. Before they were not allowed, they were encouraged, but quite frankly, weren't used as much. because it's difficult to change, right? When there's safety in certainty of what you did before, but it's actually not very difficult to do. The most common criticism before was that when you use ready criteria, well, there's more subjectivity and therefore there could be more corruption. Well, there are a couple of things here. First of all, there are a lot of studies, including in the OECD, that show that that's not true. There is absolutely not more corruption. In fact, you have also already almost 80–90% every time in consulting processes, and there's no evidence of any more corruption. Quite the opposite, there is certainly less collusion, because it's much more difficult to collude on quality than just on price. So it's actually with the right capacity, which we are focusing on. It's important to build the capacity to use it well, and using the right processes, of course. And we're spending a lot of time that it's not only delivering better results to our clients and helping us to deliver better on this global public goods, but also they give more comfort to everybody that the risks are actually lower, including of collusion and corruption. The use of judgment, of course, it's what scares more the borrowers and sometimes even the private sector. But I can assure you there are a couple of things that are done to make sure this is done right. First of all, we're not talking about many criteria, right? We're talking about a few which are selected with technical expertise at every project. We are working, for example, very closely with our colleagues in transport, and we have even a guidance note on ready criteria in transport, right, which are specific to transport. And then they're specific to the contract. And what are the key elements? There could be 3, 4, and 5, and no more, that are so important in that contract, where you really want to see the bidders bring them in, and those who are better, they should get the value that they deserve in the evaluation. And that depends, right? It could be an issue of quality, a methodology could be done better, could be a risk that in that country and that particular market is very serious, and how you mitigate that risk better, it gives you value. And this, of course, has we believe, and we hope so, the advantage of incentivizing the best contractors, those who perhaps didn't come or were reluctant or saying, we're saying you give it to the lowest, they will come because they know that now they will be taken into account. So this is, what I already said, there is actually evidence that is even better. We have done, as I mentioned, a lot of work to help our borrowers and to help our staff to do well. We still do a lot of hands-on support. You can find guidance notes on this on our website, and there are e-learning on ready criteria, both for borrowers. We're doing events like this, but we can do even more technical if needed. So this is just basically shows how the ready criteria are developed. So it starts, as I said, with the procurement strategy, because the ready criteria are basically an expression of what are the most important risks and the most important opportunities in that operating environment, which includes the country and the market, as I said before. And that, of course, varies. So you are part and parcel of how you develop your procurement strategy, because from that, you decide which procurement methods to use. Essentially, of course, goods, works, and consulting services are different, but even in goods and works, there are 2 main ways of proceeding, depending on how complex is the project. You could do with the request for bids or with a request for proposals. Both use ready criteria, so that's very important now. Every time there is an international procurement, there are ready criteria. But requests for proposals are even more complex, because we're talking about bigger and more riskier or bigger, more complex, technically complex projects. And requests for proposals are in 2 phases, because the first phase is with an initial selection, where also criteria are used, but they're used to reduce the pool of applicants to very few. Could be 3, could be maximum 8. And that's different from pre-qualification, because as you remember, pre-qualification, as long as you meet the bar, anybody can pre-qualify. initial selection is really saying these are the few who we believe have the best opportunity to present very good proposals. And then you get into the proposal phase, where you have the rating criteria, of course, and you present full proposals, right? Where you explain methodologies, personnel, kind of similar to what you do for consulting services, but you can do also for, in this case, for goods and works. But rating criteria, as I said, are everywhere now in international procurement. Approach to the market is always a key part of the project procurement strategy for development, as I said, because that's where the borrower really learns who are the key players, what drives them, with their all these techniques. I won't take too much time, but there's a whole guidance note on that explains what supply positioning is, how you really understand the market better. So the strategy you develop is the right strategy for that particular market. But also, this is what I said before. It's a part of what this, we are trying to model at the bank, but we want the borrower to do is engage proactively early on in the project. And it goes both ways, though. And that's my message to the participants, that you should also engage very early on. When you want to develop a winning strategy, it doesn't really start with looking for the procurement notices. You can still do that and maybe win contracts, of course, but a winning strategy is a systematic, it's a methodological. It starts with understanding the country strategies. What is the pipeline in that country, where you have a comparative advantage, maybe a geographic interest, or maybe you have partners. And then you start tracking the pipeline, right, of your particular, of course, type of, the part of the market that you're operating in, and you focus on that. And then projects, you find information in our website from the very beginning of a project development, with of course, who are the counterparts, who are both the bank managers, task manager, but also the counterpart in the country, what the project is about, what type of contracts, and that's where you start engaging, which is very legitimate and even encouraged, because you can really learn a lot that is, again, public information, obviously, but information that maybe not everybody takes the time to do. And reading between the line would be very helpful when you present your proposal, which now, again, is going to be rated with criteria that shows that you understand better than others how the issues that the borrower is trying to deal with, and the project is trying to deal with, and what are the risks behind, and where is the dynamic behind, so you can present better proposal. But also, the other side of the equation is that we really appreciate that, because sometimes the market tells us, or tells the borrower, that we're not doing the right thing, right? So it's a legitimate way to influence, and I mean that in a good sense, influence the development of the project when the project is maybe too cookie cutter, doesn't take into account the evolution of the markets, and we have heard great information on that. In some cases, some of the biggest projects, even some time of the borrower doing conferences where potential bidders who didn't come before the first time that contract was bid, the second time they told us why they didn't come, and we changed the process, and then they came. So, I mean, this was a very big project. It was a major energy transmission project in Central Asia. But, this in a more modest way, but it can be done in every project, meaning this engagement, right? This conversation with the market. And the market itself can start it and say to the borrower and the bank, look, you should consider something else. So these are the type of considerations that the borrower, but with the bank guidance, is doing when they decide, and depends on, again, the very specific type of project. That the bigger the project, the more complex the project, the riskier the project, and the more innovative the solutions that are sought, the more the rating criteria are important, so the relative weight is going to be higher, right? So if you identify a very big project with a lot of potential risk in a difficult place, you should expect to see 50%, 60% even on the rating criteria. This is about works primarily, and you can see these are examples. I'm not going to read them all, but it's about the management processes, the knowledge transfer could be, or the performance, how the site is organized. Supply chain management, I mentioned, is very important. And this is going to be used a lot now to also mitigate some of the risk. I mentioned cybersecurity. There are requirements there in the documents now, and there are going to be criteria for that. There are requirements. We're going to be using the Regel criteria to mitigate the risk of forced labor in solar. One important frontier, and I will not say now that it's been done a lot, but it will be very soon, I expect, it's climate, right? 70% or more of greenhouse gas emissions are in supply chains. It's what we call scope 3. And it's a bit of frontier because it's where everybody, it's still developing an approach, and the market and the countries are at different places in this journey. But many in the market, if some of the participants, some of the big companies know, already have net zero plans, how to get to net zero in their supply chains. And depending on the contract where the market can do it, because we wouldn't ask things that the market cannot do, the target market cannot do. But we will start asking what are their plans for getting to net zero or to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. Decarbonizing infrastructure is a big topic. The industry is quite advanced. I mean, I've been to conferences that was just about this, and they were led by industry. So I heard a lot great stories from industry about you use low carbon emission cements, and because a lot of the emissions come from construction materials, steel and cement. So recycled materials, different plants to reduce the carbon emissions. So that's a very legitimate objective to have, because it's part of our broad objective of climate and climate mitigation, and that is going to be also included in procurement processes. And green procurement, of course, is the big thing now everywhere, including the European Union. And there are many aspects of green procurement: resource efficiency, how to use materials that are more energy, efficient. And that, of course, depends on as I said, of the contract. I'm not telling you there is a set menu, but you can expect to see more and more requirements that are targeted to better, more sustainable use of construction materials or equipment. And all those are, going to be evaluated, right? When they're important. As I said, you don't evaluate 20 things, but those few that are the most important, that will be subject of Regel criteria. So that's why it's important to start very early to understand the project, right? You prepare your strategy, your bidding strategy at the very beginning, because you know the project very, very well. And the key is to know better than other people, right? It's not just some off-the-shelf thing, right? Where some simple procurement is still going to be like very set specifications. But if you are actually building something, or you're talking about equipment that is more complex, then really you get into like somebody can do it better than others. And that's why Regel criteria are there and give you that competitive advantage to the companies who are able to do it and able to explain it. But able to do it and able to explain it are not the same thing. Able to do it is key, but able to explain it, in my view, and I think the experience shows us that, requires some homework. So basically starting, as I said, early on in the project to understand the project, understand the conditions, understand the requirements, and beginning to prepare. These are more for the borrower, but it gives you an idea. And all these aspects have to be taken into account in the preparing the Regel criteria. But you'll find this when you read the bidding documents. Those are questions that the borrower has to answer in preparing. This is just an example of scoring, right? Could it be, how do you get to the highest scoring? Well, I mean, when you have more innovation, there is a particular target. In this case was job creation, but it could be others. This is just taken from a real project, but it's taken, but you go beyond, right? You actually can create more jobs. And by the way, job creation is an objective, can be an objective of procurement. Right? It is in the US, it is in Europe in some cases. So, these are social objectives. protection of the communities that are affected could be an objective. I'll give you an example. Gender-based violence was a very serious issue in some projects in the past. We have a very high bar for prevention of gender-based violence, what we call sexual exploitation and abuse and sexual harassment. And we even have a mechanism to disqualify contractors who do not comply with their GBV-related requirements for high-risk projects. So this really tells you that there's a lot more to know about. This is was a project in the Pacific. And it's just an example, right? I don't want to spend too much time here, but how the criteria were built here. And you can have this, you're gonna have the presentation so you can read it, give a number of criteria to, because here it's very important to use local subcontractor, trace people, because these are islands that are very isolated and, you know, there are very few bidders. So this was a particularly important. And then there were other aspects. Again, I'll leave this to you just to see examples, but I don't want to spend too much time on this. But what I wanted to say is that we want to make sure that the market understands that the bank has changed, of course, as a context, but the procurement has changed. That's the most important thing. It has become dynamic, it wants to engage with the market. It is going to be value-driven, and we can only give the best results if we really attract the best. And we don't have enough competition right now. I'll be very honest with you. So it's a huge objective for us to get companies like German companies, Austrian companies to come, give them the best value and win contracts, because when they come, they win a lot. And I wanted to give you some data. These are just, again, to give you a sense where the borrowers are. When you look at by the way, who wins the contracts, you will find a lot won by a particular country and some particular countries, but that's also because they win in their own country a lot. And one particular country, which is China, of course, wins a lot in Africa as well, because they bid a lot. There are thousands of bids in Africa by Chinese firms, but very few. Altogether, the OECD countries and the European countries, not even a few hundreds in the last few years in sub-Saharan Africa. That needs to change, I think, not because we favor any country or have any problem with any country, but because we want a much broader competition. This is the German. Sorry, I cannot see this very well because I'm covered by, but basically you can see that German companies and Austrian companies, the same, I have one for Germany and one for Austrian. When they bid, they are successful. They almost half of the times, they win and they can do better. But, you know, it's not like if when they come, and they don't come a lot, they bid almost half of the times. And by continuing to leverage these comparative advantages and learning more about the market and learning more about, I mean, the criteria and how they're used, they can win even more. So if they come, they win. If they do it, those companies who spend the time to prepare and understand the projects, they actually win quite a bit. This is just a distribution of where they win. This is for, cannot see well my own things, but this is both for Austrian and German. This is Austrian suppliers, where transport, energy, and extractive and water are the main sector to Austrian suppliers, and this was a German supplier. So this is to give you a sense. So this is for you to, and of course you are more than welcome to ask me any question after. Send me an email. The organizer can share my email, and I'll be happy to respond and engage even individually. In fact, I look forward to engaging individually if you're interested and discuss even more in detail these things. This gives you an idea of by region, where they win more. Of course, in Europe a lot. I think Africa is where we would like to have more bidders. Again, this is for. Cannot see if it's. I cannot see my old full screen. I apologize, but I think this is for the German companies. These are the countries where German suppliers are winning the most, and this is the countries where the Austrian suppliers are winning the most. This is just information, but it's interesting. And then of course you can find a lot. You see, they still have me as CPO, but they're in the process of selecting a new one, I promise. And there are a lot of information on the web. There is an app that you can download for free from the App Store, that gives you every data on procurement that you can organize by country, by supplier country, by sector, and so forth. And you have a lot of guidance note and leading documents. So I'll stop here. I think I maybe went a little over time, but I wanted to cover everything. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Enzo. I'm just gonna,
we'll try to turn our cameras on now again.
Yeah.
Stop sharing. Okay, I'm not sure how to do stop sharing. I'm sorry. But
no worries.
Good, perfect. Thank you for driving.
Well, we covered a lot of slides and a lot of information, tons of information. Thank you so much, Enzo. I hope this was really interesting. It kind of provided an overall view of where the World Bank comes through and where it tries to head. And I hope our audience got some good information out of this. Now, you already mentioned complexity, and I assume that using the rated criteria will also mean extra administrative efforts. So is it going to be rolled out to every single project now, or only to large projects? And do client countries have to use this now with World Bank financed projects? Can you give us a little bit of the background? Does it apply everywhere?
Everywhere for international procurement. So procurement that is advertised internationally, which is larger contracts, depends. The thresholds are different depending on the country market, right? And market very, very large and very dynamic in a country means higher thresholds. So there are more domestically advertised contracts. The reason why we did not yet mandated for domestic is because they don't use our standard documents, right? So we have a much more control of how our standard documents are used. When we use the national documents, which is, as you know, part of the other objective, which was using more country system and more when they have the capacity in the market, we cannot. It's more difficult to mandate it because we have to make them reform their own laws, but we're working on that as well. So that's in parallel, right? But for now, it's mandated everywhere for every project for internationally advertised contract, with a few exceptions. For example, medicines are not some off-the-shelf goods, but simple goods. But every works basically. And every more complex goods and non-consulting services. Consulting services has always been, as you know, quality-based. So,
how do you assure that the criteria are applied?
Well, that's a good question. We are maybe still too early to do an assessment. We are monitoring, of course, because as you know, most international contracts are subject to prior review by the bank, which means we have to approve the documents. And so we have a way to say no if they don't include them. Now, I can give you put my hand on the fire that 100% will do it, but I think that's the objective, certainly the aspiration. If anything slips through, we'll check it and we'll make sure that maybe there is a good explanation. Because, we are also fit for purpose, right? There may be some cases where, we're not rigid in that sense. But every time that it makes sense, meaning like, look, this particular contract, you can get a lot more value if you use rated criteria, then we will mandate it, and we will not issue no objection unless they use it. And we track through our system. It's called STEP, Systematic Exchange in Procurement, which tracks every process end to end.
I know we're running a little bit over time, but Jane, I'll hand over. Maybe you have one more question that we ask, and sorry about being, maybe we take 2 or 3 more minutes, I hope.
Yeah, I can ask the next one that came in. Enzo, what level of discretion is left with the borrower in selecting and applying rated criteria? And this goes on as well they mentioned that experience from Europe suggests that non-price criteria ratios below 40% will mean that price remains the most important element in the tender evaluation, even if the rated criteria are built into the tender. Can you touch on that a bit?
Well, that's a good point. As I said, the borrower remains, responsible for implementing the project and procurement, but the bank has a lot more active role now, also during the preparation of the project. And as I said, during the procurement strategies, that's when the decisions are made. So I think I certainly hope, and that was my mandate, what I wanted to, and I'm sure my colleagues are doing it, and as a consultant, I'm helping you to do it, to make sure that they're using it and they're using it the right way. But it is, again, depending on the contract, right? The riskier, the bigger the contract, the more it's justified to use a bigger, bigger weight on quality. And it could be 50, could be 60. If it's really big, when it's a more repetitive, simpler project, you may see lower. But the point is well taken. And I think my view is that we will continue to make progress toward using a larger percentage in quality in any case, eventually.
Given the time, I think we will stop here. I want to assure everyone you will get the slides, because there's some information that at the end you might want some data and some graphics that are really interesting to look at. This webinar has also been recorded, so we will make sure you get the recording to those. And there's a couple of more questions that we will get back to you. We will answer them. We will, Jane, I don't know, do you have a contact slide that we can show? Otherwise, when we send out the recording and the slides, you will get our contact information, and we can also offer that we can double check with him as well for some of the.
Absolutely, and I just wanted, first of all, apologies if I went a little longer. I thought it would be helpful, but I will be happy to respond to any question, those that are still there, and others that the participant can still think of later, and I will be responding timely to all of them in writing.
Wonderful. Well, this just lets me say thank you very much, Enzo, for your presentation today. Thank you to our audience in Germany and Austria, and thank you, Jane, for co-moderating this webinar with me today. And we hope to see you online soon for one of our next webinars. And goodbye, auf Wiedersehen, schönen Nachmittag.